one of the things that I think would be interesting to talk about is the early history of the journal and the various editors. Because even though the early ones are gone, you would have the most institutional memory of those people, and presumably you knew some or all the. How far back do you have memory of people?
Well, I go back to when I joined the board, which was, my memory is correct, was 1959. I joined the Economic Geology Publishing Company board when I was on at the USGS. I might be wrong. It might have been 1960, but at that point I met. Of course, they used to meet in Washington. Tom Nolan was the chairman of the board, president, whatever we call it. Alan Bateman, of course, was the editor. I've known pretty much everybody who's involved with everything. Of course, I didn't ever know John Dewar Irving. He died in World War I. He was the first editor, and the journal, even as it exists today, you can look back and see very clearly John Dewar Irving's hand in the way it's laid. We've never changed dramatically. It's got the same kind of structures, criticisms, discussions. Bateman was his student. Bateman was a graduate student at Yale. He's a Canadian. Came down as a graduate student at Yale. Irving died in the great influenza epidemic. And Bateman, who by then had been moved into a more permanent position in the faculty at Yale, was asked to take on the regular role as editor. And he basically didn't change the structure at all, or the way Irving laid it out. Nothing really changed. Society was founded in about 1920, and it was founded for reasons other than being a scientific society. They were concerned about accreditation. The journal had always been a journal in which the founders wanted it to be a scientific journal. They didn't want it to be a trade journal. Bateman was very fierce about that. He didn't want the journal to be taken over by the society. He always made that clear, and the board, even though they were all members of the society, the board, when I joined it, made that also clear. They viewed the society as having different goals. Really, that continued on right through the era of up to the point where the society freed up its conditions for being a member. Made it much easier for people to become members. You didn't require all the professional experience and that sort of stuff. And as the society changed, which it did in the 80s, it slowly changed, in part as a result of what came to be called the Blue Ribbon Committee report. Then it became a little easier to talk about blending the journal into the society. When I became chair of the board, I canvassed all of the people who had objected in the past, and they agreed that with the new structure of the society, the journal should become part of society. We had 2,000 members. We were selling 7,000 copies of the journal. So it was perfectly obvious that there was a community out there who couldn't become members because of the barrier against it. So in a nutshell, the big steps of the management, but there were all kinds of little steps along the way. When I went to Yale in 1966, Bateman was still editor, and I'd been on the board, and one of my closest friends, personal friends, was Walter White, who had become the chairman of the board. So White was concerned about Bateman because it was clear that he was not getting stuff reviewed. He had an editorial board, had names on it who were not alive. He would sometimes accept a paper and then ask a member of the faculty at Yale to read it and let him know if it was okay. It was clear to the board that the journal was clearly in trouble. so they decided that they have to convince Bateman to voluntarily resign. I mean, Allen had been the editor for heaven knows how many years. I can't remember, approaching 50. The deal was that Bateman would resign if the journal could be kept in Yale. And so White's, this was all done with my agreement ahead of time. So White said, well, I'll talk. He would talk to me, see if I would agree to act as sort of an interim editor for a year or two while everything was worked out. Bateman agreed to that. The first step was to put in a modern editorial board, and the next step was to start changing a little bit the flow of papers. We're missing out on entire fields that people were simply not publishing stable isotope stuff, which was all coming into vogue at the time, maybe 1971, doing special issue papers. The board was very skeptical. They were very supportive of everything I did, but they were a bit skeptical because Alan Bateman said, that would never work. In 1970, I can't remember the date actually. I agreed that I would take on, I would continue to be editor for a little bit longer to get everything going, and I found I really rather liked the job. So the result was I just continued doing it. I had good staff because we did all of the management of the stuff, dealing with the printer and everything. If you're lucky, you don't have to do that, Larry. That's terribly time consuming. But that's why we had a big staff. 2 and sometimes 3 or even 4 when we were dealing with lots of big special issues.
My biggest issue was trying to ease Brian Skinner out of the editorship. He'd been editor for a long time, and we tried to think of some excuse for getting him out of there.
Yeah, well, fortunately, you didn't have to do that. There were a couple of interim editors who had been used as wedges. I remember having dinner with Sam Adams one time, and I said, it's about time. He was on the board. He was the member of the board. I said, time for me to stop being editor. He said, I'm glad you said that because we're thinking that. I said, right. It's time for Marco to take over. He said, you've already chosen your new editors. Good choice.